Good afternoon. Hello. All right. Hello, I'm Matt. I've always been a huge fan of politics, and I'm quite obsessed with it. My firm belief really is that, as well as all the other great speakers that we've had today have sort of made the point of politics needing to engage with people, I think there's an emphasis on the fact that people need to engage with politics as well, and you can't always absolve yourself of your responsibilities as a citizen by simply saying that politics isn't for me. It's difficult at times. I think it's difficult currently. But I think what's quite important, is key to our relationship with politics, is sometimes to view it as entertainment and to liberate ourselves from taking it too seriously. Now, my favourite television programme is Prime Minister's Question Time, which I realise is tragic. And I realise that most people don't like it because it seems like a publicly, a public school, predominantly male, middle class and old club of people that are alien to you and I. The problem is I find it absolutely brilliant television as a result. And I would like to recreate, because I think a lot of people have never been, have never experienced it, I would like to recreate the magic of the House of Commons right here in this historic, modern conference hall. Now, I'll talk you through it. We'll do this together as a room. Entry-level behaviour in the House of Commons is the noise of agreement, and it's this noise. Here. Now, I want you to all do this as loud as you can, right? I'll say something you could barely disagree with, and then together as loud as you can, and it'll feel like we're right there at Prime Minister's Question Time. Mr. Speaker, I think the only solution to our country's economic woes is to ensure that everyone present today at this TED event gets £100,000 in cash. That feels good, doesn't it? Don't you feel more elevated and learned already? Oh, yes. The problem is, Parliament is the only place you can make that noise if you agree with something. If you do it in Wetherspoons, you look simple. I'll tell you what, Terry, Arsenal cannot defend. It's difficult. There are politicians as well out there that you might not want to vote for, but that can be enjoyed, purely for entertainment purposes. A lot of these politicians are currently found in UKIP. Mostly Nigel Farage. Now, I like Nigel Farage. I would never vote for him, but he has a particular set of skills that partly explain his success, but partly mean you can just turn him on the telly and enjoy him for a bit of fun. He never ums and ahs. His political skills, he's always on the ball, and he always manages to get a sort of political message into any answer. You could ask him anything. You could say, Nigel, what'd you have for breakfast, mate? And he'd go, tea, toast and a telegraph, great British breakfast, right? He's on it the whole time. That constant sort of, there we go. Look, no, for too long, the British people have been overruled by the European Constitution and by balmy Brussels bureaucrats since the dawn of time. And it almost sounds vaguely plausible when he says it. The problem is with Nigel is that it sounds great, but the lyrics are awful. He's like Oasis. Still there to be enjoyed, of course. I interviewed him. I set up a show. I was so disillusioned with the way that elements of the arts were covering politics, because I love it. And even people I disagree with, I think, deserve to be respected. And I set up a show in London called The Political Party, where every month I do a bit of stand-up and then I interview a politician. And I had Nigel Farage on. Some of the stuff he came out with, and there's a lesson to this, is that I think for the most part, the way that politicians are interviewed is in quite a hostile manner, even by sometimes quite a slavish mainstream media. Politicians are immediately mistrusted. They're not given enough time to get their answers out. So what I wanted to do was build a show where actually they're allowed to waffle a bit, because if that is a price worth paying for more interesting answers and for a politician relaxing and saying a little bit more interesting, these are people who care about the future of the country, who are deeply motivated public servants. I wanted to give them a bit more time. And I wanted to have a bit of a laugh, so I got Nigel Farage on. And some of the stuff he came out with, this is word for word his view on global warming. He said, well, look, people talk about the greenhouse effect, but have you seen a greenhouse? I mean, stuff actually grows in there. What? I said, have you ever tried living in a greenhouse? He went, fair point. And that was the end of it. Amazing guy. I mean, I have to admit this is difficult to admit, but if I was a woman, I'd find him sexually attractive. I think partly because, some people are just drawn to rebels and he feels like a bit of a bad guy. The problem is, I think that he constantly talks in that way even when he's in the bedroom, and that'd freak me out. I'm going to undress you. Then I'm going to satisfy you because it's nothing less than you and the British people deserve. Fucking hell. Freaked me out a bit. There's a view as well that there aren't any characters. You know, politics is boring these days. All the leaders are boring, MPs are all the same. It couldn't be further from the truth. There's some fascinating people in Parliament. There's a Conservative MP called Douglas Carswell, who just a few weeks ago stopped a thief in the middle of his constituency and held him, when he saw him exit this stationery shop, held him there until the police arrived. Now, my favourite part of this story is not that he apprehended a thief, because that's good. It's what he said to him. A number of eyewitnesses heard this Conservative MP Carswell say to this thief, when he got him up against a wall, he went, "You probably don't want to hear this, mate, but I'm your local MP." What? Oh, no! Not the local MP! What sort of a re-election campaign is he going to have? Carswell, what have you ever done for this town? Well, I helped reduce NHS waiting lists, didn't I? We gave a tax cut to people on low incomes. I stopped that fight outside Yates's. None of you lot got involved, did you? There's a big fear with it. I think there's a genuine risk you could turn on the news in a few years and hear the Conservative MP Douglas Carswell was stabbed to death today intercepting a multi-million-pound cocaine deal on the streets of London. His final words were, "You probably don't want to hear this. I'm not even your local MP." If you watch it as much as I do and enjoy it as entertainment, you'll notice certain things, and this can be quite exciting. You can play games when you're watching this. The pitch of William Hague's voice has changed dramatically with his reputation. From 1997 to 2001, when he was leading the Tory party, he spoke very much at the top end of his vocal range. And partly as a result, although more to the fact that he didn't have great policies at the time, he was dismissed as a bit of a pipsqueak. He went away after defeat, shaved all his hair off. He came back as Foreign Secretary, and now talks down the bottom end of his vocal range, talking to the House of Commons about matters of grave international importance. Gives him a sort of authority. Now, as Steve alluded to, my favourite politician is Tony Blair. This gig has turned. Now, the thing about Blair is, I feel sorry for him now, because he can't say anything without people immediately jumping down his throat, even when it's quite sensible. In the wake of the European and local elections this year, he was talking about what Ed Miliband's response should be to UKIP, and he said this: "Look, I think the danger is that Labour tries to sort of tack right on immigration, tries to outflank UKIP in terms of promising a referendum, and look, you will only alienate people that were going to vote Labour precisely because we weren't going to promise a referendum. So I think expose UKIP for their more grotesque elements and campaign against them on their record as you would any other party." But because it was Blair, right, perfectly sensible, right? Because it was Blair, people went, "Oh yeah, he's poking his nose in again. Oh, Blair, have you heard what Blair's come out with?" He could say anything. He could say, "Look, I think if you're going to have a barbecue in this sort of weather, you're better off waiting for the sun to come out." Because for too many years, you'd start it when it was raining and the meat would get ruined, frankly. So wait for a decent bit of sunshine. People would go, "Oh yeah, what are you saying, Tony? People who live in rainy parts of the country shouldn't be allowed to eat meat?" Oh, you make me sick. What if you ain't got a barbecue, Tony? You're going to make out your neighbour's got one and then bomb him anyway? Oh yeah. Poor guy. Boris Johnson as well. Wow, what a character. How can you not enjoy that bloke unless you've got to live under his rule? He's got a fascinating technique, particularly when he's asked a question about David Cameron. He will immediately, firstly, flatter the audience, throw in some Latin, and then talk about David Cameron in the most sarcastic way it can't be taken seriously. "Oh, no, look, it's great to be here. This TEDx event, one of the greatest, frankly, houses of democracy and vibrant place of debate anywhere in the country. And I say to my friends, nivi, nedi, nidictum. And all I would say is, all I would say to, David Cameron, he is the most decisive we've had since Disraeli, the most impassioned since Churchill, and indeed the most masculine we've had since Margaret Thatcher. So there you go. Marvellous leader." In a small way, oratory does matter. Obviously, what politicians do is crucial. But if they're going to be around, and if we're going to engage with them, at least enjoy the ones that make the world a little bit of a brighter place by the way that they do it. And to demonstrate this point, that even taking the same passage can be delivered in very different ways, I'd like to read a paragraph from one of my favourite books. That's a nasty surprise, isn't it? It's a good job I'm not going bold at the back. That'd be an awful way to find out. Oh, shit. Let's read a passage from one of my favourite books, Winnie the Pooh. Now, I'll read this paragraph in the style of three speakers. Firstly, in the vague style of Nick Clegg, who I feel is at the lower end of the oratorical spectrum. Secondly, as Tony Blair, and then thirdly, as a generic Northern trade union rep. So firstly is Clegg. Now, the thing is with Clegg is that Nick Clegg often puts in those sort of fake pauses. Where he's trying to make it look as if though he's saying something relevant. Very frustrating to listen to. So I'll do it firstly as Clegg. Watch in amazement as these words literally fail to leap off the page. As it happened, it was Rabbit who sort of saw Piglet first. Piglet got up early that morning to sort of pick himself a bunch of violets, and when he sort of picked them, put them in a pot in the middle of his house, it sort of suddenly came over him that no one had ever picked or a bunch of violets, and the more he sort of thought about it, the more he thought how sad it was to be an animal who never had a bunch of violets picked for him, right? Stiff, starchy, Clegg, right? Now, in the hands of Tony Blair, Blair's oratorical style was this. Talk about the big stuff. And then make it personal. What? Oh. Oh, in Blair's hands. As it happened, it was Rabbit who saw Piglet first. Piglet got up early that morning to pick himself a bunch of violets. And when he picked them, put them in a pot in the middle of his house, you know, it suddenly came over him. No one had ever picked Eeyore a bunch of violets. And the more he thought about it, you know, the more he thought how sad it was to be an animal who'd never had a bunch of violets picked for him. Oh. Now, finally, the generic Northern Union rep. All we need to know about these people is they don't pause for breath, they're Northern, and whatever it is they're talking about, there is a deep injustice at the heart of it. As it happened, it was Rabbit who saw Piglet first. Piglet got up early that morning to pick himself a bunch of violets. So when he picked them and put them in a pot in the middle of his house, it suddenly came over him. No one had ever picked Eeyore a bunch of violets. So the more he thought about it, the more he thought how sad it was to be an animal who never had a bunch of violets picked for him. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Matt Forde. Enjoy the rest of the day. Ta-ra.